Welcome to the Mindful Table with Health Empowerment Coach Joanna Mickel and myself, Maame-Mensima Horne, Naturopathic doctor and clinical hypnotherapist, where we discuss natural approaches to health and wellness with an emphasis on being mindful. Today's episode, we will discuss the season change, specifically spring. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, I know it's fall if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. So today we'll be talking about spring. So the change of season is really important, especially in traditional medicines like Chinese medicine and even Ayurvedic. And as a naturopathic doctor, I try and incorporate the change of seasons into the work I do with my patients because at the change of season, if you're working with the seasons, then we're more attuned with what is going on with nature, and it makes it easier for us to, at this time, get things done or to be more engaged, especially as a time of growth. If you look at the trees and you see flowers, there's a lot more greenery coming up and out. So there is that growth. And because of that energy, if we work with it, we're able to be more successful in our goals that we set out for ourselves. So I'm going to hand it over to Joanna, who will continue that. She studies Chinese medicine, and she'll be able to give a little bit more context about the spring and the significance in Chinese medicine.
Yeah, so in Chinese medicine, of season, being aware of the seasonal energies is something that we have to take into account, not even just the seasons, but time of day. So there's ways you do your treatments in accordance to those rhythms, you could say. So we are beings that are actually part of a circadian rhythm. So there is a time of day we should be awake, a time of day we should be asleep. There's times of years when we should be a little less active, times then we should be a little bit more active. And so a lot of times we're going against all these circadian rhythms and wondering why we are not successful in some of the things that we'd like to do. So, we always have at the beginning of the year, we did a podcast kind of about New Year's resolutions and, how we want to do something new in the new year. Well, that really isn't the time of year that we should be making New Year's resolutions if we go based upon the energetics of the seasons, because we're still in wintertime. And in wintertime, the body is about hibernation. It's about conserving. It's a yin time. It's a time to kind of regroup and rebuild, kind of like nighttime. Nighttime is a yin time too. It's a time when the body is rebuilding after a day of work. So it's when we don't get good sleep at night, it leads to a lot of health issues. You've probably heard of third shift being called the graveyard shift. And the reason for that is because it tends to cause elevated cortisol. It tends to cause stress on the body. A lot of these individuals that have worked for years and years and years on third shift tend to have chronic illnesses such as hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and they could be eating healthy because it's going against the body's natural circadian rhythms. And so when we're doing that to ourselves, we're leading us into health conditions when we're not thinking about these times of years. So when we look into making New Year's resolutions, the best time to really start New Year's resolutions is in the springtime with regrowth, because now the body is waking up and saying, oh, it's time to move. Trying to lose weight in wintertime is a little tricky. I will say that's because the body naturally slows down the metabolism because, again, wintertime is a time of survival, a time of yin. So our body naturally wants to put on weight for conserving, keeping us warm, again, rebuilding, restocking. And then in the springtime, it's ready to shed. It's ready to move. It's ready to cleanse. This is a great time of year to doing detoxifications and allowing the body to rejuvenate and open up into new things. So the energy at this time of year is a time that really helps us to be able to make goals and to go after those goals because the energy is up and out, blossoming, blooming. I've got myself back into running, and this, I tried to do this at the beginning of the year. I can tell you, I tried to do it too because I'm like, I gotta get running again, and my body's like, I don't want to run. But now it's like I'm out running. It's like, oh, I love running. It's great. My body's like, yeah, let's go. And so the energetics is there. So when we follow those energetics, we give ourselves the phases that we need to go through, those changes that we need to go through the year to be able to rebuild, restock, cleanse, and then go forward. And when we do our health management through the seasons, through those changes, it can be a little bit easier and it can actually be a lot more beneficial to us. So again, we're a circadian rhythm, kind of directed through circadian rhythm. And so we can actually utilize that for health and wellness. And then thinking about women, we're very phasic, very circadian rhythm, because we also are in a 28-day cycle through our menstrual cycles. And those also are things that we need to be aware of on the foods that we eat during these cycles to support our body through these hormonal cycles. And it's necessary for health, wellness, and good fertility if you're looking to have children. Being able to understand our daily cycles, our monthly cycles, and then, of course, our yearly cycles, then we can be able to build our health programs or our health and wellness plans ahead to say, okay, this is when I'm going to do, a cleanse. This is when I'm going to restart. This is the type of exercise I need to be doing. These are the foods that I need to be eating. Because if we eat along with the seasons, this is another thing that we probably should kind of touch on today too, is that the food actually has the nutrients we need for those seasons. But if we out of season, we're not getting the nutrients that our body needs more of at that time of year. So being aware of food by the seasons, when you're eating fresh foods that come out of the garden for those times of year, like right now is bitters. Again,
Mhm.
detoxifying foods are what's coming out. So that's going to be your leafy greens, your broccolis. Those are the things that are this time of year. Back in the day, dandelions were a big part of our diet. They used to, I think in like my history of family, they used to call them greasy greens. I guess because they were cooked with bacon grease, dandelion greens with bacon grease, and they called them greasy greens. And that's what they would eat a lot of in the springtime. And of course, dandelion is very high in vitamin C and a lot of nutritive minerals, which is very important at this time of year for detoxification and remineralization and renourishment after a long winter when you're eating kind of whatever by the end of the season. It's whatever's left in the garner, you could say, back in the day when you were a farmer or, hunter-gatherers, it's whatever was left from the season, because, of course, in wintertime,
Yeah.
it's whatever you've gathered and stored. So kind of
Yeah.
that's where we look at it in a Chinese perspective and, of course, in a natural medicine perspective of the seasons and what we need to do for our health and wellness.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Yes, no, definitely. You talked about this being a season of detoxification. Also, before I became a naturopathic doctor, I was self-studying Ayurveda after I learned about it in my yoga training. Also, during this time is when it is recommended to do more of the detoxification. So in Ayurveda, they use a lot of foods like chickadee, which is like a rice meal or like a rice dish that is very simple. It's a very simple food and it's different from when you hear like I would say in the Western world when we say we're going to detox. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go on a fast, a juice fast, or I'm gonna like stop eating. But like in Ayurveda, there isn't like, oh, I'm gonna stop eating per se, depending on your energetics, your personal energetics. But really, it's going to a simple diet, very simple diet of rice and mung beans and maybe some vegetables with a little bit of ghee and cleansing your palate so that when you're like for like a short day. It's like a spring clean for your body. Like we have spring
Mhm.
cleaning for our home. But that spring cleaning for our body is to really help us to reset. And like you said, in the winter, yes, you're eating what is left. But like I would say my experience in the West is that we tend to eat depending on where you are, meat and potatoes, more hearty foods.
Mhm.
Why are we eating hearty? So that we have the energy to maintain our warmth because the winter is a colder and time of year. And so we do need to pack on a little bit more weight so that we're actually having the fat stores in order to generate heat because we do generate heat from our fat. And so having that extra layer is important just for the thermal regulation, the regulation of our body temperature. But coming into the season of detoxification, in a way, again, this is the time where we can incorporate some of those changes to our diet, where we're simplifying and, like you said, incorporating more of those leafy greens. We're incorporating, as you're saying, what we're finding growing. There's a lot of flowers, right? So once the flowers start, that means the fruits are coming soon, right?
Mhm.
Because after the flowers come the fruit. Because of that, we have a lot more greenery that we can add into our meals. So like you were saying, as far as detoxing, I know in the West, we do use a lot of bitters for
Mhm.
the liver. I know in Chinese medicine, bitter is the
Uh,
taste of the heart, but it's also from the West. We are trying to detox, so we're using the bitters to kind of stimulate digestion to get things moving. And one of the things I really love about the season is the emotions, right? So the emotion of this of the well, we should probably talk a little bit about the different organs with the seasons, but right now with the spring, it's usually the time of the liver and gallbladder. And the liver
Mhm.
and the gallbladder have the liver specifically is really it's where we hold our blood, but also we talked about chi stagnation in the past, where the energy of our body can sometimes get held and constrained and it's not flowing freely. And when we have liver chi stagnation specifically is what we would expect when there's a lot more frustration in our lives, a little bit more
Mhm.
anger. And so with that, we want to encourage that movement because again, the winter is a time of coldness. Cold energy congeals, so there's less movement. And so
Mm.
we do expect a little bit of the cold energetics still there. And the more that we move our bodies, the better our circulation is. And the more that our emotions flow more easily, it's easier to express. And when our emotions are not flowing easily, we do see that frustration come up. Yeah, so anger and frustration tends to happen. And so the goal is to help move the body so that we're able to help release some of that constrained emotion. And with this change of season, the weather is getting warmer. The flowers are blooming. And yeah, there's this desire to go out. This week, actually, I did go back into hiking. I went hiking earlier in the change of the season, but I also went back this week. And, that desire to actually move and do more and be out and just expand, it's really if we work with that dynamic, it really allows for, like you said, it's more ease. We've
Mhm.
talked about the need for some level of discomfort in life to achieve your goals, but everything can't be going against the grain. So utilizing
Mhm.
the energy of the seasons at least allows us to get over some of those humps. Because
Mm.
again, in the winter, it's more dark. It is, the days are shorter, the weather's colder, and who wants to go outside? It's like, let me snuggle up close by something warm, give me a warm drink, and let me just be.
Mhm.
So, having the spring and being able to tune into the energetics of being a little bit more out there, there's a lot more moisture in the air. We went from a very drying time to where now it's a lot more abundant. There's a lot more energy of rejuvenation, right?
Mm.
Like this is the time where if in the animal world, you'll see a lot more of the babies coming out
Mhm.
because when you're hibernating in the animal world you just have you and hopefully your little snuggle partner to stay warm because they don't have homes and the technology that we have created, so we'll see
Mhm.
the little baby animals coming up and popping up, showing the energetics of the time where it's like all that is new is coming. And
Mhm.
when we're talking about emotions, it's really the seasons in the winter, it is more of like the sadness and a little bit more of kidney energy is a little bit more cold, but that's also like fear. So it's like when people kind of stay in and you're just not really out and about. Um, so because of that shift, we are encouraged to be a little bit more social. It is a time where community, it's a great time to build community. It's a great
Mhm.
time to foster things that you want to do. What are your ambitions that you are looking into that you really would like to start? You were
Uh-huh.
talking about the New Year and the Roman calendar, the Western
Uh-huh.
calendar being January 1st. But like the Chinese New Year started this year at the end of the middle of February.
Mm.
And then, other cultures like the in Iran, Nowruz, which starts at the turn of spring, that's the sign of the new year. So for other cultures, the new year actually starts much later at the end of the winter going into the spring. And I do
Mhm.
believe that it's because this is that time that we're actually more aligned with the energy to do more. Like you
Mhm.
were talking about the yin and yang, yin being a more it's more a feminine energy, which is more dense and more still. But
Mhm.
when the sun, the more the now we have more sunlight, a little bit more sunlight, the days are getting longer. That young energy, that energy of becoming, you need that initiative, right? A little bit of that fire to get started.
Mhm.
So as the fire is getting more and more, I guess it's growing more and more because the spring is becoming summer, we see that there is more initiative to get things started. There is more desire and energy to get things done. And what I'm seeing clinically are, my patients who are struggling with fatigue. This is when it becomes a lot more evident because they're doing more. And it's
Mhm.
like, oh, yes, I am very fatigued. I am having these issues that may not have been as evident during the winter, but now that we're going out more, we're doing more. If you're in a walkable area, you're walking a lot more and you want to be outside more. That's
Mhm.
when they start noticing, you know what, I'm not able to do what I could do a few months ago, or I'm out of breath more frequently because, maybe I'm not fully recovered.
Mhm.
During the late fall into the winter, there's cold and flu season.
Mhm.
And what we saw, especially, we talk about long COVID back during the COVID season, which is now integrated in cold and flu. Long COVID, I've worked with people who've had long COVID and helping them recover utilizing naturopathic medicine,
Mhm.
homeopathy. It's during this time of the year that they become more aware that, you know what? I need extra support because I want like I'm at a lack of energy. I'm at a lack of vigor. And, I didn't notice it before because everybody
Mhm.
has been sick and but now, like I want to be out. And
Yeah.
so because of that awarenesses, it's like when people are coming and getting that extra support and we're able to help them, like I'm able to help them to regain some of their energy, that vitality that was lost during the cold and flu season, which is
Mhm.
now, I think it's easier to work with that because they're going outside and we can see every day if they're getting better or not,
Mhm.
So yeah, I really love the spring. It's one of my favorite seasons. It's so vibrant and colorful. So,
I mean, it's a time of rebirth, talking about the babies and everything, and that's the energetics of it. The wood is the energetics, like you were speaking of the liver and the gallbladder. And the liver and the gallbladder are all about moving forward, about making choices, about making goals. It's the energy of pursuit, you could say, and of direction for the body. And if you look at the energy of the gallbladder, it's courageous. It's about this decisiveness. And so when somebody is considered out of balance in the gallbladder, they can't make choices, they can't make decisions, and they're stuck. And then that frustrates the liver because the liver doesn't like to be stuck, it doesn't like to be hindered from moving forward. And I'm a liver person, I'm a very woodsy person. And, if you go to homeopathy, that's a nux vomica individual. That's their constitutional remedy, which is very woodsy, and we get very irritable. That's kind of the first sign of an out of balance wood person is the irritability, the agitation, the aggravated energy. Think of a general because that's what it's, position in Chinese medicine is the general. And if you think a general cannot move forward, he's going to be agitated and aggravated and he's going to be very raw. That's the energy, and you can see that in the springtime when people can't move forward, they get stuck in their goals and something is roadblocking them, they get aggravated. Road rage. Think about people in road rage. That's kind of a woodsy energy. It's a very bad. woodsy energy, but people are hindering them from getting where they need to go, and they get agitated and angry, and they go a little too far. And I will say that sometimes I get a little agitated and I rub at people and then I go, try to bring myself back down. Okay, wood, stop. We don't need to get aggravated with people. Some people are not woodsy people out there on the road. They're water people, so they're fearful, so they drive really, really slow, and they really get on the nerves of us woodsy people. But that's the energetics of springtime, is being able to shed those things. And so then thinking about liver and gallbladder, they are your detoxing organs, along with, of course, the bowel, the bladder. So everyone has a little piece of it, but kind of the starting point for detoxification, we understand through if you get into physiology, is the cytochrome P450 or whatever it's called, mechanisms that are found within the liver, which, certain proteins and our medicines, if you take medications and different things that may get into your body, the liver converts it into molecules we can excrete, whether it be through the bowel or through the urine. So this is the time of year. We need to give the liver a little bit of love because of the fact that it's heightening. So its time during the day is the gallbladder and liver is from 11 o'clock at night to 3 in the morning. So 11 to 1 is the gallbladder time. And then 1 to 3 is the liver time. That's when they do a lot of their work. So that's why it's so important for being in bed. We talked about, third shift being the the graveyard shift is because those energies is meant for us to be asleep so that those guys can do their job of detoxification and giving them that energetics, because it's hard when we're moving for it to do that work. And then through the year, that same time is springtime, to where the body is getting rid of the stuff that's kind of accumulated over winter time. And so this is a time of giving those organs a little bit of love. And so working with the green leafies and the sours as well, kind of prepping and using it, which tends to be citrus plants tend to come out during the winter time. And so then you're using that to prep for the springtime and then so forth. And if you actually look at it, you're kind of prepping, like you were saying, bitter is the heart's flavor. And so we're kind of prepping for heart time, which is the summertime, kind of keeping the heat from getting too hot before summer, because you don't want to overheat it in the summertime. That's fire time, heart time, getting out there. That's when we shouldn't eat as much in the summertime because that overtaxes everything. We want to stay cool. So that's why you're going to have some of your fruits are coming out, like your watermelons and those guys that keep us cool and nourish us with hydration, getting our peaches, yum, yum, yum,
You just got
our
me
summer
thinking about my favorite.
squashes, our cucumbers, thinking of those types of foods in the summertime that keep us cool. So, and berries are also known as a liver food. And those are our springtime fruits, the berries, which really are very helpful to the liver and have a liver energetics. It's also got blood energetics. So you think about these foods in the springtime are very much blood builders, which of course is a supporter of the liver because the liver helps in building and storing blood. And so we're coming back into we need to get nourished and rebuild our blood because you'll find that we tend to be depleted after the winter time. So we're rebuilding that. And then in the summertime, we're hydrating the blood with summertime. And then we go into, of course, fall is our metal time. That's when we should be letting things go through the bowel, the large intestine, the lungs. So that's about grief. Death is letting go time of year. So that's the time of year when we're trying to let things go and preparing to rebuild from the release. And then we go into our new self in the springtime. So that's kind of the energetics. Now, in between is the earth time. That's our ponderance time. When do we think about things? Now, we don't want to get anxious and we overthink things. That's what we overdo. That's the spleen time. So they give it what they call late summer is the earth time. But really, in true fashion, there's everything between the season kind of comes back to earth is what they really do in the 5 elements. So that's the time we think about as we're changing through these seasons. That's what I like more about it, is that the earth is the transition between the seasons rather than it just being at the end of summer. It's actually the transition between the seasons. This time we come back and we regroup and say, okay, as I'm moving into this season, where am I wanting to go? What am I doing? And it's kind of the self care time because the earth is the mother. It's kind of the one that nourishes and it nurtures is the word I'm looking for, and we cultivate at that time. So, we're kind of gathering ourselves here as we transition into spring, saying, okay, I'm moving into this forward energy. It's time for me to make changes. It's a new me. It's a rebirth of myself each year of saying, okay, where do I want to see myself move this year? And taking that energetics and then making your plan. This is when you plan. The earth
Mhm.
kind of is your planning season. And you move forward from there, and you kind of step into that energy of the wood, or you step into the energy of the fire, step into the energy of the metal, and then the water, and so she's kind of the in between is the spleen energy. And spleen is also connected to the pancreas. And so in the body, that's your digestive. So we call it transformation and what's it? It's T and T. I forgot the
Yeah,
other T.
transformation and transforming the chi. I honestly am
So
it's
we got a
gone from
block.
my brain as well in this moment.
Transportation and
But yeah,
transformation, I think it is. And so it's
yes.
how the body takes in the nutrients and is able to move it into what it needs to be within the body and making sure everybody gets what they have need of. And so that's kind of the idea of the spleen and the pancreas is that they're able to digest what we're thinking about, what we're taking in from that seed, and then move it into the areas of the body that requires the certain amount. So like the lungs getting what it needs, the kidneys, and so forth. And so, it kind of holds the blood, you say. It holds the energies where they should be. Whereas the liver stores the blood, the spleen holds the blood. And in the blood is your emotions, they call it. The emotions and some of the memory is found with and housed within the blood. So we have things like low vessels in the body where we're kind of holding stuff that we're like, I haven't had time to deal with this. So this is a time of year we can kind of deal with those lows. Like I didn't have time for that, but now I got to go back and deal
Emotions.
with this energy, this emotion, or whatever to be able to process it and release it so it doesn't create stagnant energy. Because again, you were talking about liver doesn't like stagnation. It has to move. When it gets stagnant, it gets frustrated. It creates heat, creates
And then
which
trap.
in you think about inflammation, it's a heat process. So when things get stagnated, heat begins to form. And that's inflammation. And so when we go after those stagnant areas, we can release heat. We can release these inflammatory responses, which is what we like for detoxification, and allow the body to process and move forward. So that's kind of the energetic work between spring and that transition period of Earth that helps us to move out those things that we've allowed to get stuck. Like I like when you brought up spring cleaning. Exactly is the thing. It's like we got to spring clean. And that's spring cleaning. The energetics, both externally and internally, are the same. And we're kind of projecting that energetics when we do the spring cleaning of the house. We should be also doing that spring cleaning of the body as well, getting into those nooks and crannies and saying, oops, I needed to get rid of you a long time ago. Now it's
Yeah.
time. So that's kind of, how I see it a little bit more in what you were talking about there.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, honestly, it's you what you shared got me thinking about a few things that like encounters I've had with people, especially around emotions. And one of the things that has been coming up for some of the people that I've encountered and work is during this time there just seems to be a little bit more anxiety, and it's like a collective anxiety. And it's like, what do we do? How do we make these changes? Like, and then when the internal world and the external world are kind of like the external world is reflecting some of the uncertainties. There's a lot of whether it's internal conflicts or external conflicts. There may be things where it's like it's evident that changes need to be made, but like when you're stuck in the mud, literally. So the image that came to me is like being in a car stuck in the mud, and the wheels are turning, and what happens that you can smell the rubber burning, you can smell the heat being generated, but the car is not moving. And
Hmm.
that is one of the most frustrating experiences that somebody may have if they're driving. I think that's worse than, if you're in gridlock, and the
Uh-huh.
traffic is kind of slow. At least you know that you're going to be moving. But when you get stuck in the mud, there's no movement. The wheels are just spinning and there's no control. You have to like get out and try and push it. And if you don't have support, somebody to steer the
Uh-huh.
wheel, then you're kind of like stuck, really. So that energetic of being stuck in the mud, the frustration, but also the over processing, the overthinking that happens at the same time, that is something that I'm noticing people are experiencing. And then, depending on what's going on and how it impacts you emotionally, then that also adds to it because it's like, okay, like really, there's a change that needs to happen. How do we go about this change? How do we either mobilize and come together? Or is it something that I need to have the courage, like you're saying, the courage from the gallbladder? Like, am I going to make
Uh-huh.
a decision? What decision am I willing to make right now? And I
Uh-huh.
thought, and it's funny, like, for example, I'm like, it's so weird. Me being in Korea, I made the decision to move to Korea last spring. At the very end of the spring is when I made the decision, and I made the move at the beginning of right before spring went into summer. I think that was my first, that was like I bought the ticket and I was in Korea. So,
Uh-huh.
that this time of year really is a time where making decisions and really, I would say, the process of is this the right energy? Is this the right move? Is this not the right move? And all of the uncertainties that come with making decisions, whether they're like, oh, I'm going to go on I'm going to change my lifestyle. I'm going to make this change. I'm going to go and do this activity. I'm going to start exercising more, whatever it is.
Uh-huh.
This is also like the time of year that people contemplate. I'm actually realizing I made a lot of my major life decisions during this
Uh-huh.
period of time when I went back to nature, like decided I wanted to be a doctor. It was
Uh-huh.
in April. I did all the work. I applied to a pre-med prerequisite program, started in the summer, right? So,
Uh-huh.
I know from my experience that when I've had to make really huge decisions, it's not in the winter. Like in the winter, it's just like, can I do this? Can I not? And then the action, the thought is there, but it's like the action's not there. But
Uh-huh.
going back to school, when the classes start, most programs start either in the fall, and then
Uh-huh.
here, actually, programs start in the spring. And during these two times of the change of seasons, like major
Uh-huh.
changes in the seasons, is when new things start.
Uh-huh.
And when I'm thinking about that and how easy it is once you get the thought process going, once you start making the plan, even, when I came, I was like, I'm just going to go with the flow and see what happens at first. But,
Uh-huh.
making the big decision to like up and I get that question, why are you starting over in a brand new place when you could, but making those decisions, they happen in the execution and the courage came during this time of year,
Uh-huh.
because it just well, I don't know. Like, and I think about a lot of the decisions I've had to make. It is during this time of year that, there is a little bit I find I have a lot more courage to just go out and do what needs to happen. Even if it's something that I may not think it's like, oh my gosh, am I really going to do this? And I see that actually happening because I'm in language school. There are a lot of younger people. So in my day to day, I spend a lot of time with young people and seeing how they're making decisions, what is holding them back and what's causing them to have a little bit more anxiety. Being able to see that and then even having conversations around that, I'm seeing how these energetics come into play where it's like having these major decisions, like in the winter, seeing people making the decision if they're going to go home. And then there are people who are like, no, I'm just going to stay one more season. Let me do one more semester. They stay in the spring and then they decide they're going to continue on. Because once they're in that decision, that doubt that they had before, if they're putting in the effort and the energy, they naturally see that they can overcome that barrier. And once you start overcoming the barrier, it becomes easier and easier and easier. Yeah, like I'm actually seeing that. And I've been seeing that, learning Korean in the winter was hard. Like, the levels just get harder and harder and harder. And I'm like, in the winter, I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm like, trying to like use all of my resources to just try and speak, because the hardest part is about communication. My friend's like, wow, you have a lot of the vocabulary in your head, but your communication is off. But but now there's like this ability, it's like, no, I'm going to keep trying.
Mm,
And it becomes easier to just have those random conversations and make fools of myself, because, when you don't speak a language well, and when the thing about Korean is that the language is tone, there's like sounds. Like I
mm,
can try and say if I miss or drop a sound, or if I don't say the sound the right way, like there's ka, there's
mm,
ga, and there's g. If I say "guh" or "cuh" instead of "guh," then I've already like, it's a totally different word,
mhm,
okay? So, little things like that, it's just like, hey, I'm just like, my mouth doesn't make some of the sounds yet, but
mhm,
it's just the specifics are so intricate, and you have to be a little bit more meticulous, and so those are things as well that can create frustration, but having the courage to keep going. Like, I recognize if I didn't make it to the spring, I probably would have given up, because it's just
mhm,
like, "Oh, this is, himdiddle is a very difficult this is difficult." But
mhm,
that difficulty when it's like, "Oh, it's difficult, but the flowers are blooming, and I can say the flowers bloom today." That
mhm,
kind of energy keeps you going forward. So, that idea of being stuck in the mud and not knowing if you can make it over, if you're gonna get out of the mud, if you're gonna get the push that you need, and it happens with the effort and the decisiveness to keep going. And
mm,
seeing this mirrored in my experiences right now actually is, I feel like it's just refreshing, right? It's like the energy of spring. I like that. Oh, it's refreshing. I have the
mhm,
energy to keep going and wanting to keep trying. And I feel like that is what I bring to my patient encounters, right? It's like, we could do it
yeah,
because the season is with us. So,
that's right.
yeah.
Yes, I mean, that's the same. I have people that I'm getting ready to work with, and it's good that they're starting at this time of year. It is a better time to, with that energetics to move forward. Not that you can't do anything at any time of year, but again, going with the energetics makes it a little bit easier to move through. Again, that summertime is the time of growth and moving forward with whatever it is we've done. So in summertime, it's really just moving that energetics even more so. The fruits are ripening on the vine. So when we have different types of energetics going on or different things that we deal with, like I said, spring is detoxing, summer's about growth and nurturing things and making it come to its fullness. Then we have fall. We have people that we deal with grief, and being able to let things go. And it's kind of hard to let things go when you're trying to nourish things. So trying to get individuals to let things go in the summertime or the springtime when it's that grief and they're holding, it's not going to be as easy for those individuals. And so when we move into fall and winter, that's a time where we can truly, I think, is a time of grief, sadness, letting things go, looking back on our lives or whatever it is, looking back on the year. No, we get disappointed. I didn't meet my New Year's resolution. People get like that at the end of the year. Oh, I've got 6 weeks to meet whatever my goal was, things like that. Well, it's okay that if we don't meet our goals to the capacity that we wish we had. Being able to take a look at ourselves, reflect. This is the time of year, not spring, but it's fall and winter that's the time where you self-reflect. That's the time we come in and we regroup and we let things go and we grieve and we have sadness. And fear has a place. We tend to look at fear as a weakness, and that's their winter energy. But it's a time where, fear also has an aspect of respect and, respecting life, respecting ourselves. As a Christian, people used to say, oh, no fear was a big, you know, catchphrase back in the day. I think it was the 90s or something, no fear, early 2000s. And it used to get a negative stigma, which because of its, you know, can be seen as no respect. And, but we need some amount of fear and we need some amount of respect because if we respect the cliff, we won't fall off and kill ourselves. That's the kind of idea what we want with fear and respect, is to be able to know our boundaries, to know and to be able to set them not just for ourselves, for other people. And that's what respect is to know our boundaries, to know what it is that we want in life and how we want to maintain our safety. And that's what winter's about, is safety and respect, and being able to know that, okay, this and no further, because I don't want to fall off the cliff. I don't want to drown in the water. You have a certain amount of respect for it. It doesn't mean you don't get in the water and swim, is you respect it. There's a boundary with water, you know. And so these are kind of the things that when we look at these energetics and we use them, we can actually build a life, cultivation is a big part of Chinese medicine, and I think
Mhm.
we miss that in Western medicine, the cultivation by utilizing these energies, cultivating our lives, understanding, because boundaries, I think for women is really some of the hardest areas is, and again, that's respect, right? Boundaries is respect. Um, and we don't get a lot of respect, not to jump on what people think is the feminist flag, but no, it is an issue. And women don't know how to establish that. So we have the unsafe fear because we see, we're fearful in that we're going to be violated. And so when we put fear in its place and say that we need to assert maybe some of that liver energy, which comes after that fear energy, to say, "This is where you're going and no more, so you're gonna have a respect for me, that this is as far as you can go in my arena." So, that's kind of how we make balance in all of the seasons, is understanding, what is this energetic? How do I use the energetics to cultivate in me who I want to be and gain the respect and the honor and whatever it is from my environment, those around me, and meet my goals, and know how to move forward and letting go, and not, sometimes we have to grieve who we used to be, and say that was for that season, but now I'm moving forward into this new season. And this is where I want to move forward. So you grieve it in the fall, you reset those boundaries in respect of where you want to be for the next year. Then you come out into the springtime and say, okay, this is what I'm cultivating this year. I planted that seed, because that's really what you're doing in the winter and fall a lot of times, is planting a seed by allowing it to go into the ground and saying, okay, this is my thought, this is what I let go of, this is what I'm planning to bring out into the springtime. In the springtime, now that energy is flourishing, it's coming out of the ground. You're just like, oh yay. And in the summertime, you're cultivating it, you're nourishing it, you're giving it the warmth of the sun, and you're allowing it to flourish and to come into maturity and become a new part of your life, and then the cycle begins again and again. So that's how I like to work with my clients, is to say, okay, what is it that you want to be? So I was kind of regrouping with someone this past week and saying, okay, let's we need to kind of start again, on where you want to be in it. She kind of shifted in what she wanted to focus on, which is fine because we're in the spring. Let's shift our focus. So she started sometime last year. So we're shifting and saying, okay, what is it that we want to really work on this year? And so sometimes that's what we want to do, is, okay, let's take a look at the energy we're in, and let's bring it back into alignment, and then let's move forward from there. So that's kind of how I work with my clients, and it's good to see some coming in the springtime so that they're in that energetic. So it's like, oh, we're gonna have a good start. And then being able to pivot with the season.
No, I think that you sharing that it's very true because you went really beautifully through the energetics of the seasons and how they play a part into our decision makings. And as you were talking, when you were talking about boundaries and respect, a lot of the work that I do helps people to build those boundaries, reinforce that boundaries. And one of the things that I firmly believe and I try and impart on the people I work with is that our boundaries are for us, right? Though, the way that we love, and I've shared this before, even though I'm not Christian, I do incorporate, like, I grew up with some of the teachings, right? So, love thy neighbor as theirself. Love, and also, you want to love God or
Mhm.
whoever, whatever you believe in. But like, if you don't know what love is, it's hard to love other people. And
Mhm.
it's also hard to actually have a relationship with nature or a divine. or your ancestors, whatever it is that someone's spiritual beliefs and practices are around. And so helping people to, number one, cultivate that love for self, because if you love yourself, then you're going to hold yourself to that boundary, and you're going to hold yourself to respect. And you're going to hold people accountable when they don't, or you will just say, okay, like, I'm not getting what I need out of this dynamic. So I'm going to pivot my energy. And,
Mhm.
I don't know, like, sometimes that pivot for some people has to be super dramatic, but sometimes that pivot can just be like a redirection of energy of like, okay,
Mhm.
like, you know, I've given, and relationships are a give and take. If I'm open to explore something, I don't have to make it like a put a sign like, "Oh my God, I'm so open to this experience, everything," but it's about the energy that you're willing to carry with you. So if you bring yourself to an encounter and you're not matched, and it doesn't have to be, being matched doesn't mean like the person has to be 100, you're at 80% capacity and the person only has 40%, but they're bringing that 40%. If they're bringing that 40%, they're putting effort, then that's a reciprocal. They're reciprocating at their best capacity. And one of the things that I'm working around is honoring our capacity. And in order to to know that and to have respect and to have the boundaries, you first have to kind of know yourself. And if you're not really aware, having that awareness, I think, is the first step in the work that we do in healing.
Mhm.
Working with a holistic medicine practitioner is different from Western medicine. In Western medicine, you're given usually a pill or recommendation, surgery. They may try and do some lifestyle things, but like the foundation of our work is really like the lifestyle. Your lifestyle plays a major part in your health, your well-being, your disease process. In hypnotherapy, really the work that I'm doing is helping people to become aware of the thoughts that or the experiences and the belief they have that influences their behaviors. And once you're aware of what you're thinking, so going back like to the
Mhm.
boundary, if you really don't have a love for self, maybe your experience up until now is that you're not lovable, but you didn't know that. It's just that you had these experiences, and then once that first experience happens and then other experiences reinforce that belief kind of becomes consolidated. And then the behaviors that come out of being unloved and unlovable essentially is not being, there's a behavior. So understanding what the
Mhm.
behavior is, because for every person, it's different. That's why, there's like, yeah, like I appreciate the books that talk about, oh, if you have this pain, this is what it means, and all of these things. But those pains come from everybody's individual experiences. And those individual experiences create thought processes and beliefs, and those beliefs get reinforced because our behavior changed. So,
Mhm.
with that awareness, once somebody's aware of it, then we can make the changes. And it's interesting because a lot of us are not aware of how we're behaving and why. And
Mhm.
so what is stopping the boundary? What's stopping us from saying, you know what? Like, and I'm a very diffuse person. Like, I'm an empath. My boundaries have always been intangible. Like, I can't touch them. I don't know where they begin and end sometimes because,
Mm.
but I know, like, when I'm living my life, I'm asking, is this mine or is this not mine? And I know
Mhm.
it's mine. At this point, I've done so much healing. I know it's mine. So being empathic and being able to feel, it's every day my body feels amazing. And then I go somewhere and I'm like, oh my God, I don't feel so good. That lets me know that there's something in my environment that is not in alignment. There's something in my environment that needs to shift. Or someone in my environment that may not be well. As a doctor, it works really well, which is why I love what I do. However, in real life, going out and just being an average person, that can be overwhelming if you don't have that understanding of who, like, I know who I am. So,
Mhm.
because of that, I'm able to have that boundary. And even if I'm very nurturing and giving and loving and kind, I can still do all of that and know when, this is it. Like, I've given and this is my wall. I'm still going to be kind and loving, but I'm putting that energy towards myself,
Mhm.
right? And so when we're working with people, the work I do doesn't really matter the season because during
Mhm.
the season, like you said, whether it's grief or like during different seasons, people come for different reasons, right?
Mhm.
But the work in itself is still consistently the same, figuring out what it is that allows this pattern to happen. And whether that's an illness or it's an emotional component, having the tools in order to support people through the seasons of their life,
Mm.
because like you're saying, there is a rhythm to life. And as we age, there is a season for everything that we're experiencing, right? And so because of that, I'm just grateful that I'm able to support people, but I do believe that knowing thyself, knowing yourself, you having that relationship with yourself allows you to, in seasons like this, be able to have the courage to make a change that can be life altering. Or if you are, if you have an experience that is very traumatic, having the support within yourself,
Mhm.
building, cultivating that, right? Because as you talked about cultivation, what is cultivation? Like the practices in the past were cultivating our energy, our chi, so that we're
Mm.
able to withstand, it's like in Buddhism, whatever the emotion is, it's not supposed to rock the boat. Ultimately, we build our chi so that we're able to have the capacity to support other people and to make it through. And so if we have our capacity at the place where we're able to withstand a lot of the external factors, then we're able to actually have the strength. And today I was Al Jazeera, their English, they have like a channel, it's a news outlet. But Al Jazeera did this really interesting piece on video games recently. And
Mm.
it got me thinking, actually, I saw it today, which is why it's so fresh, but it was talking about video games and how games like Call of Duty, I'm not a video game person. I grew up being told that it really impacts your, and I do believe
Yeah.
it impacts your chi, but the
Mhm.
Call of Duty is like a shoot war, like you're shooting people up kind of game, right?
Mhm.
But the creators of these games were actually told, so they actually consulted with like our military, and they get told, hey, consider this angle. We want this place and said place and all of this stuff. But utilizing video games in order to normalize things like war, conflicts, and things like that. And in Chinese medicine, at least, okay, so when I was studying Chinese medicine, one of the things we were told is the small intestine, which is the partner to the heart. So the heart is our joy. The small intestine is the yang organ that pairs with the heart, but the small intestine actually gets impacted. The energy of the small intestine can get impacted by overstimulation through screens, like watching TVs and video games and things like that. And the small intestine, and Joanna, you're going to have to help correct me on this. I know, so, like a lot of practitioners, my teachers, they try not to do a lot of work on the heart channel directly. They will work on the small intestine or other organ systems, right? The small intestine being the yang. So if there's excess in emotions in the heart, then taking the excess and like moving it through the small intestine is something that is done. But from the mind body perspective, because I'm an advanced clinical practitioner of hypnotherapy, and with mind body medicine, going back from looking at Buddhism, we use a lot of visualization. We use our thoughts and our emotions, yes, but it's really through going within, through meditation, by spending time with the self, but also through visualization. And so these simulated experiences, whether they're TVs or video games, that are conditioning us. They're putting us in these experiences that we don't know if it's real or not. Our body and our mind don't really know, right? Why it's so fascinating because we're having so much that every society is different. But because of the media and how media can be used to shape our reality, right? That's why virtual reality is so controversial because virtual reality is a simulated reality. It's not real. So having these artificial realities that are essentially conditioning us to normalize certain things and certain behaviors. I have actually noticed in my work, there are people who had amazing childhoods, but their trauma actually comes through the media that they
Uh-huh.
consumed as a
Mhm.
young person,
Mhm.
And that to me has been I've always loved films and music and all these things, but I've actually been more aware of what I consume because of that, because I see it as a tool. Being a hypnotherapist is so controversial to some people. And they're
Mm,
just like, oh my God, it's cool, but like people may not want to work with me because I'm a hypnotherapist and they think mind control. But the research is showing that through the media alone, the things that we're consumed, the places that we go, the things that we are told, all of those things actually play a major factor into our beliefs and our ability to take action and our ability to have courage and our ability to say, you know what, this doesn't feel right. I don't agree with this. I want to make a
mm,
change. But
mm,
if you're inundated with information that's like, oh no, this is cool, this is great, then even if your intuition and your gut is saying, no, this is wrong, it's hard. And so that's why, like for me, a lot of my work is really allowing people to come to that space of this is my truth. This is who I am. And because this is who I am, I'm more aware, I'm more selective, and maybe I'm not going to spend this energy in said media or in said relationship because this is not in true alignment with who I am, right?
mm.
And so, yeah, what does that have to do with the seasons? You know what I mean? I feel like when we talk about making our decisions and how we navigate, like you were talking about with clients, and I do that as well with patients. When we're looking at our goals and we're making a plan to work around that, having awareness of what actually is imposing on us, what is impacting us, what is influencing us, allows, I would argue, a level of freedom because with awareness is power. With awareness, we
Mhm.
get to make decisions and we actually act with much more clarity. Yeah, and our intuition speaks to us in ways that when you're not connected, it's harder to say, you know what? A lot of my patients actually they came to me after praying. After praying and I'm praying for work too, right? That's when we meet. And so I've had people and they're all religions. When they're in a need, they call on whoever is guiding their spiritual path and we're led to each other. And so what I've come to recognize is that really when we are ready to change and we come into that place and we are very aware of our needs, our support comes and we're able to be guided through what we need through the seasons as well.
We were talking about, the media and all that stuff. There's a book called Methods of Persuasion. It really shows, the negative stigma on hypnotization. What is it? You know, the media has made hypnotism, a problem, but they're being hypnotized every time you end up on a screen, whatever it's you're doing. You can easily become hypnotized and you don't even realize it. And they program your subconscious for responses. I was watching a reel the other day that really I loved what the gentleman said. He was talking about freedom. What is real freedom? And he said real freedom is responsibility. Because when you take responsibility for whatever is going on in your life, you have true freedom. When people take away that responsibility, which is why I call myself Health Empowerment Center, my business, is I want to empower people to take back their health, which means you have a responsibility to your health. I love naturopathic principles and the therapeutic order. I always am reiterating that with my viewers and with my not patients, clients. I don't have patients till next year.
Mhm.
Because I
You're
am a
almost
health
there.
coach. I'm not a licensed practitioner. Hope to be soon, and I will be. But there is a reason that we have so much illness in the West is because of that taking away of responsibility for health. And it's been taken away subtly by not giving the knowledge to the patient. With naturopathic medicine, we give them their responsibility because we are docere. We are doctor as teacher, which means we give you information, we give you education to know how to take care of your health. And that means you have a responsibility now. And that goes with everything that we have in life. If we put off on somebody else the responsibility for whatever it is, we have now taken away some of our freedom because now we can't do what we want. We can't be what we want because that's somebody else. So I kind of took that to heart as saying that's true. With true freedom is responsibility. Spider-Man says, with great power comes great responsibility, I think is how that one goes too. And so, that's the thing that if you want to have power, you're going to have responsibility. And we can see in some of the areas that's not happening, but we won't get on that. But, and so I'm like, and that's what I want to help people is that they can have the knowledge to take on a responsible, healthy lifestyle. And so understanding, how to move with the seasons, how to be able to do the self-reflection, to mitigate some of the things that, not allow people to come in, because basically when you're exposing yourself to this media and, they put you in a turmoil a lot of times, especially when you have the dichotomy of the two viewpoints of politics. I'm not a politician. I don't like politics. I tend to try to stick it because I can see on both extremes how they just tell each other the same thing. I'm like, what's up with you guys? Anyway, and so it wherever there's the algorithm in social media. That's why I hate social media. There's algorithms that are put into play to play those. Because when you map the brain into a certain thought process, it remains there. It's easier and you can't get out of it. So when you come to someone like us, naturopaths and, Chinese medical practitioners, and, we're trying to derail those thought processes that have created a health condition in your body, because that's literally what it does. When you set up a thought process, it creates hormones, it creates neurotransmitters, it creates physiology in the body that creates a health condition. And the only way to get out, I loved what you were talking about, getting into that belief system, right? And that belief system starts with, starts those thought processes, and so if you have a belief system, like you said, and I've had this before as my trauma story, I'm unlovable. And that was my trauma story. When we did mind body medicine back at SCNM, that was the trauma story that came out. And you worked with me and kind of blew it up a little bit more so I could see doing hypnotherapy. It was a very intense session, but it really showed me the generational trauma of the unlovable, right? And being able to see that I couldn't comfort somebody because I wasn't comforted, because my mother wasn't comforted. And I don't know my grandfather's story that may have continued that somewhere back in the line. But, that belief system was back there, and I still have hard time with that. And it does create, and it used to shut me down, with people. I would reject people before they could reject me. I actually saw that also in a movie. I think it was, what's the movie? Oh, it didn't. Jumanji, I think she made the statement to the young lady, one of the other characters, like, do you not just reject people because you don't want to be the one rejected, and you just go ahead and reject them? And she goes, oh, maybe. And so she was made aware of this so she could stop doing it, and that's kind of, it rang with me that a lot of times, because I saw myself as unlovable, I would just go ahead and reject people. And so I never really had a lot of friends. I never had a lot, well, I'm still single, but we're going to get into that. But, that is the kind of the thing is understanding these belief systems and these times of life, right? And so working with people that can help us to cultivate and to bloom in the season of blooming is very important. And you really, I'm going to give you some kudos and a pat on the back. It really helped me, and it helped my relationship with my mother to be able to see those. And that was the time of life for me. I don't remember what time of year it was, but it was in the fall, which was actually the right season, because that was a time of being able to mourn and to release, those things, and to be able to love myself in that nourishment of the yin season, to kind of contemplate on that. And then the next spring to be able to come forth and be able to see myself and to recognize I am a lovable person, and that I need to share that same vision with my mother, who went through some traumatic things as a child as well. And and so these are the things that when we can bring that and say, let's get away from the social media and the whatever that was, Call of Duty, and, get people to recognize these things are programming you and taking away your responsibility to your health and wellness, to say, okay, it's time to be clear thinkers and don't get stuck in the meta data of social media that's going to feed these beliefs that are not giving you health and wellness. And let's take a look at, these seasons of life to say, okay, who am I first? Who am I
Mhm.
that I want to be? Because really, who you want to be is already who you are. That's what I tell people. Whoever you want to be is already who you are. Because if you have a desire, it's already there. And so that's the thing that we have to recognize is we just have to cultivate who we want to be. It's already there. And so it's how do
Yeah.
we find the people? How do we take that responsibility? Because when taking responsibility doesn't mean you do it alone. That's why I talk about the therapeutic order. You don't do health alone. You have, that bottom tier where your
Support.
lifestyle is what you do, but you have to use these other individuals. We're a community. That's the other problem is community has been torn down so much by the fear factor where we've made walls in the wrong places. So boundaries are
Mhm.
necessary, but if you just make your boundary space where you're alone in it, then
Yeah.
you're not going to have that support that we can give as practitioners. And we're not here to direct you. We're here to walk with you, and to give you the knowledge you need to do through these times of life so that you can say, okay, like you were talking about the car that's stuck in the mud. You can't get it out alone. You might have got yourself there alone sometimes because we try. And I will tell you, remember when you first met me, you and I think Alicia both told me, you want to do stuff for us, but you'll never let me do nothing for you. Because I was trying to do things alone. Because
Yeah.
that's that trauma story. And so I was stuck in the mud, you could say, in my personality to be able to move forward and to make friends and stuff. And so, so I was watching the Harry Potter movies, and it really struck me the difference between the villain and Harry was that the villain wouldn't really let anybody help him. He had to
Mm.
be great and strong, and it was a very, to me, satanic kind of spirit. That's not what, a true loving God wants you to love one another and to be a community. And Harry was like, I always had help. I wasn't nothing great. I had help. Though it looked like
Yeah.
it was me, it wasn't me alone. And that really
Yeah.
struck a chord. So then I was like, yeah, you can come help me now, and then I realized it's community. We grow with our community, with those that we allow in and be vulnerable with, but we still have, and then it's a give it, like you said, it's, you come with what you got and you work with one another. And by doing that, my 40% may come to 80% eventually.
Exactly. Your
Yeah.
capacity
So,
changes. Yeah. No,
yeah.
I love that. And the thing is, it's not like, media is horrible, is bad. No, like I recognize things as tools. It's like where people get with, AI is a tool. How you use the tool is really the main thing that we
Mhm.
really have to use discernment with. Social media is a tool. If you find yourself getting so swamped in, and even I have to do that. I'm like, okay, like the last couple of weeks, I notice, I know that I need to put my phone down. And so maybe instead of doing that, I'm going to do other things, and there's so much more that comes out of it. So I really love the work that, I feel called to do. And I really feel that in doing this work, it is increasing the capacity. It is helping with the process of cultivation. It is really about, we're talking about boundaries, but those boundaries are permeable. Like we are able to use discernment and say, you know what? My boundary, I have these are my non negotiables. I have a
Mhm.
few non negotiables. And if you cross that line, then hey, but at the same time, I can put myself in I can put myself in a situation. I'm like, how did I get here? You know what I mean? But I know my boundaries are not going to get crossed. I know that something crazy is not going to happen because I'm not going to allow it to happen. And I'm not saying that there's certain things that we don't have control over. There are things that can happen to us that we have no control over.
Mhm.
But the things that we do have control over, for me, those are the things that I pour into. And I think it's
Mhm.
important to be able to pour into
Mhm.
because that's where the discernment is, right? It's like if I'm not against playing video games, but if you go to a video game not knowing, it's like watching a music or listening to music or watching a movie and it's like, I'm always like, oh, this is a subliminal message. They're trying to get me to feel this way. I mean, getting
Yeah.
really good at that. Like,
Yeah.
And it's funny because a lot of people, why do people love K-dramas? They're wholesome. Most of them are wholesome. It's like, it makes you feel good. And it's like, but at the same time, there's this whole joke that, people come to Korea thinking that the K-drama reality is going to happen. I did not come to Korea because yes, I like the K-dramas, but it's not because I believe that the K-drama is going to be a reality. I mean, if my life becomes a K-drama, hey, who am I? But that's not why I came here. I came here because I love learning and cultivation and the medicine, right?
Mhm.
And to be quite honest, a lot of us come here and then there is safety. Like there's a feeling of feeling safe. There's CCTV. There's reasons why. There's a level of like, I'm okay with you knowing all my business. I'm not going to do anything wrong. Like, if I know I'm not going to do anything wrong, I don't mind the level of, when you move here, all your information, right? Like, they know everything. Like, I got a bill for health insurance and I was like, oh, I didn't even sign up. No, they signed me up because now I'm a resident. So it's like,
Mhm.
I have to pay into the system and I didn't have
Yeah.
to sign up for it because they know. They're like, girl, you here. You're part of the society. You gotta pay a part of the society. So with that safety, there is a cost to being anywhere. But a lot of people who move here, we move here because like it was honestly when I came here, there's 1,000 people in one short, small area and like a
Mhm.
very popular place. Actually, yeah,
Mhm.
somebody else's, I was talking to a schoolmate and they were like, I moved here. I don't make eye contact. When you live in a big city, you don't make eye contact. You don't do all these things because everyone's a threat, depending on where you're from. And this is somebody who's not from America. They were like, I thought that somebody would want to fight me. But then I came here and nobody wants to fight. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
people actually are not trying to cause conflict. Like nobody
Right.
wants to be like no one wants conflict unnecessarily. Like, yeah, even if I pissed off a couple of taxi drivers and they will say what they have to say. They say some words. I'm like, oh, okay. I know that's not a good word, but they say their words and then afterwards they're just like, when they realize that, I'm not just wasting their time because I'm a bad person, it's like, oh, then we're having a good conversation. Like one
Mm.
time I lost my bank card. It was in the
Oh.
ATM and the ATM ate it. And it was a Saturday after hours. And I'm in the taxi and I'm like, I am so sorry. It's like the day I'm moving here too. It's like, I'm so sorry. I'm moving and I don't have my bank card. I mean, I could pay. I have
Mhm.
other ways of paying, but it was just like, he was like, so like upset. And then when he realized, like, shoot, she lost her bank card, he was like, everything's going to be okay. And he's telling me this in his Konglish, Korean English. Don't worry. What time do you have to get to the train station? Because me and Rosie my cat and I were taking the train from Seoul to Busan. And he's like, you have time. Don't worry. And I was like, you know what? He's right. I don't need to be worked up. He was a little worked up. I was a little worked. I was just like that frantic. And he was just like, no, everything's going to be okay. Don't
Mm.
worry. You're going to get where you're going. And he was
Yeah.
right. He was right. Like I
Yeah.
was late to all my appointments that day because like miscommunications. It was really weird. It was the day that like the war started as well. So it was like
Mm.
the energetics were just off and I could feel it. And it was just like, all of this stuff was not going right. But
Mm.
he was like, don't worry. And everyone was just like, don't worry, it's okay. And that's like the way that even when there's negative things, it's like, no, everything's okay. So that's why people come here. It's because like a lot of us are like, oh, there is this thing. So it's like your nervous system, my nervous system is used to this energy of peace, and it's a collective energetic, which is a little different depending on where you're coming from. But because of that, that's where it's like having those moments of reflection, as you were saying with your clients, like I came here with one goal. If I'm not able to meet my goal and get into like the school and, it's a lot of work and I'm like, oh, girls getting closer to, I want
Mhm.
love and family and all the stuff like we talk about. But the reality is like, this is the season where I do look at what my goals are. I look at what my goals were last year and the energy that I'm putting into it, whether it's the right thing or not, like this is the time where it's like I definitely recalibrated my direction. I'm still
Mhm.
doing the same, same similar idea, but like the way I go about things is totally different. And I love
Mhm.
that we're able to bring that wisdom to the people that we work with, because shifting and change and going with our own unique flow are all part of our individual journeys of healing and finding our path. So, yeah, is there anything else you wanted to share?
I think we've covered quite a bit today. The seasons, and then we kinda went on some tangents a little bit, but, I mean, that's really what it's all about is really seeing the season of life, and, that's why we're called the mindful table, is taking it back to the mindfulness, being aware of things, I think is probably going to be our root in all of what we speak on, is taking it back to our belief systems, taking it back to our self-awareness, to be mindful of our times of life, mindful of the energetics, because all of this plays a role in our health and wellness and our overall well-being, which is where we focus as healthcare
Yeah.
practitioners. So, that's what we want for our listeners, is to bring them to awareness of the energetics of the seasons right now, and taking a moment just to reflect on where is it that you're heading to this year. What are you wanting to grow into being? Again, you're already your desires of who you want to be. Now it's time to cultivate it. Take a look as what step can I take this year towards that person that I am obtaining to be, that I am in reality, that you can make that one step towards it. It's nothing big. It doesn't have to be anything big. It could be something just very small, but every step, I think it's a Buddhist saying, a step, the journey of a million miles starts with one step, I think, or
Yes.
something like that.
Yeah.
And so just that's all you got to start with, and that's what we want to help you with today, is take that first step.
Yes. No, thank you. And thank you for joining us. Yes.
Yeah.
And our listeners, thank you so much. And as you take that one step, like tuning into the courage of that gallbladder and really having the courage behind you to move forward and make the changes that you want. And also to just live the life that you feel is most aligned with who you are. So thank you for tuning in. Next time we will come back and share some more. The topic is not yet, but I feel like where we ended up going will probably guide a lot of what's next for us. So thank you so much. Enjoy your spring and we will see you soon.